countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop!
That's right, we are opening up the shop to newbies to help them find their way underneath this comic book tent and maybe figure out how to throw that hammer so it comes back. It doesn't just hit the wall or go through the window, break something.
Ultimate Frisbee? Shush.
Yikes, we're keeping the shop open for the oldies that know what the heck we're talking about today, as we're going to dive into one of my favorites. After last week, one of my favorites didn't go over so well. I'm trying again. Ryan again with some of the best in comics this week.
That is true. That is true. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Jay Scott and the wonderful Chad Smith, who, again, last week, we had a year of Chad pick. That's right.
Leftover edition.
You may or may not know that all through 2023, we gave Chad an opportunity to list some of his favorite books, and we read them on this particular program. And I won't lie, Chad is known to pick really good books. So a lot of his books were
most of the time.
You guys don't know what you're missing. I'm telling you.
We do know what we're missing because we just did Squirrel Girl.
In any case, a lot of his books were either like 4s or 3.5s. We did Squirrel Girl last week and didn't resonate as much with myself and J.A. and George, who was stopping by the shop. So we gave Chad an opportunity to do a no-brainer this week. Chad, what book are we reading this week?
We are reading the first volume of the Walt Simonson Thor run. So we're tackling issues 337 through 348.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be tough to talk about this book other than, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because it is one of the greatest runs on a single character, I feel like, in the history of comics. The Walt Simonson run of Thor is legendary. It is epic. It is godlike. It is wonderful. And I look forward to talking about it. But we are closing in on the end of the year, and we can't just keep on giving Year of Chad picks for our Marvel books the rest of the year. So I thought that we would do something fun on this particular episode of The Last Comic Shop. You know how we do tournaments, guys?
We do love our tournaments, especially when Dr. Pepper is getting roasted.
Oh, if that's not proof you guys don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Pepper losing to cherry soda. Oh, you know, it's overtaking Coca-Cola. It's the number one soda in all the land. Dr. Pepper has.
Hey, we put these things in a bracket. It's a fair fight. And I thought that this week we have one more Marvel pick for later this year. Again, we're going to be doing a Marvel book around the time Venom drops. I think we have one already predetermined for Halloween, which is Blood Hunt. So those ones are already picked, but we have one last Marvel book to fill up our quota for 2024. And so I thought that we would have a tournament to decide which mighty Marvel tome will take that spot as our final pick of 2024. So I asked the guys to come up with 3 picks apiece, myself is included. So we've got 9 books. It makes for a really terrible tournament because there's basically a play-in game just to make it. But what we did was we took these books and I randomly assigned them in the bracket so that these aren't considered like the top pick versus like the worst pick. You know, even though, you know, one's a 1 and one's a 9, they're all randomly put into this bracket. And so we are going to vote. Make your case as to why you feel like it should be going on. Fair enough, gentlemen? I don't think there should be any ties, and we only have 3 people. So, you know, there's going to be a majority rules on these regardless. So let's go ahead and get started with round number 1. This is the play-in game to just even see if you can get into the bracket. And we've got one of J.A.'s picks coming in at number 9 with Black Panther, Nation Under Our Feet.
That's the Ta-Nehisi Coates initial Black Panther run.
Versus another classic 80s run on a particular Marvel character with John Byrne's Fantastic Four that was put out by Chad. Would that be volume 1, Chad, or are we going to go straight to the trial of Reed Richards?
That's a great question. I've never read either of those, and so I'd be okay either way. What do you think? Should we do volume 1 or should we do the trial?
The trial does have some good issues surrounding it. There's a really neat storyline where the Fantastic Four team up with Terrax to fight Doctor Doom because he's trying to steal Terrax's powers. But hey, that's part of this discussion. So we've got Panther versus Fantastic Four. J.A., why Black Panther?
I mean, it is arguably the best Ta-Nehisi Coates run on Black Panther. It was his first run. He has, I think, 4 other storylines, but this is the initial one. Started in 2016 and ran 12 issues. There's a rebellion inside Wakanda against the Black Panther. Tradition versus modernity and technology versus this ongoing kingdom thing. Adaption. How do you adapt both as a person so the nation adapt? Interesting story. It's an interesting read, and it got quite a lot of press when it first came out.
Okay. Chad, make the case for why Fantastic Four by John Byrne is going to beat that, though.
Simply because it is held in high regard as one of the best Fantastic Four runs. And I've read some of the Stan and Jack stuff. I've read the Jonathan Hickman run. That Ryan North run has been kicking all the butts recently. And so, why not go explore the last vestige of Fantastic Four that's worth the time? I don't know what happens because I haven't read it. But I feel like I should at some point. So why not toss it out?
There you go. Well, I have read the Fantastic Four run, and I will say that unlike the Walt Simonson run, I don't know if it starts off with such a bang. The Walt Simonson run, comes with Better A Bill and the logo's breaking apart and stuff. I don't know if that happens in the Fantastic Four run, although it's really good and it runs for a little while. So my vote is for Black Panther. We haven't read enough Black Panther on this particular show. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a really awesome writer, and I've read some other books of his in terms of his run on Captain America. Yeah, Black Panther is moving on to the next round. All right, so coming in the 4-5 matchup, which is traditionally one of the more difficult matchups during these brackets, we've got 2 massively popular storylines in the original Armor Wars out of Iron Man. So the one from the 80s with the Bob Layton art versus, I think it's a book that we've talked about on the last Comic Shop podcast before that we should read, and that is the original Death of Gwen Stacy from Amazing Spider-Man. So the lead up to the George Washington Bridge incident. And how far would we read? Would we get all the way out to when Harry becomes the Green Goblin? Correction,
it's actually the Death of the Stacys, collected in a trade that's readily available for folks out there. But it's The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issues 88 to 92, involving the death of Gwen's dad, Captain Stacy, and then Amazing Spider-Man 121 and 122 that involves the death of Gwen and the fate of Norman Osborn.
All right. And so that's going up against Armor Wars. JA's pick. Why should Armor Wars overseed the moment that, finished off the Silver Age of comics?
Because we haven't read any Iron Man on this show at all. This or the one where Tony Stark is a drunk. Those are the 2 great Iron Man runs. We haven't read any Iron Man. Now that Robert Downey Jr. is coming back to Marvel, we need to read some Iron Man, I think.
All right.
That being said, we should read The Death of Gwen Stacy because, yes, that is a seminal moment. The whole idea that it's the end of this age is just BS. Those ages are crap because how are we still in the modern age 30 years after it started?
Well, I think that it's unanimous there. I think that if we don't read the Death of Gwen Stacy on this show eventually, we're doing a disservice to the fans. So I vote for that one, too. So Death of Gwen Stacy is moving on, although Armor Wars would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, Spider-Man doesn't have a lot of essential stories out there. You think of Batman, you can always think of those trades to toss out. With Spider-Man, you got Kraven's Last Hunt, and everything else is soap opera, which is wonderful, but it's hard to encapsulate what makes Spider-Man so great. And that happens in The Death of the Stacys. The other thing I wanted to mention to Jay is I have my copy of my Marvel 75 Years Omnibus, and it has the greatest stories in Marvel's history. It's got Hulk, it's got the X-Men, it's got Thor, it's got the Thunderbolts. You know who it doesn't have?
Iron Man.
Doesn't make the cut.
All right. Well, Death of Gwen Stacy is moving on. Let's move up to our 3-6 matchup. And this is the first of my picks on this particular show. Coming in at number 3, Brian Michael Bendis, Alex Maleev run of Infamous Iron Man. That's right. With all of the talk about Robert Downey Jr. coming back to play the bad guy, as we just mentioned, it's time to take a look at that series where it's kind of like a redemption arc for Doctor Doom. Like in the post-Secret Wars 2015 run, Doctor Doom gets his face fixed. He decides to be a good guy without Reed Richards around, kind of like going sane. And so nobody believes him. But he's still the good guy. And I just think that this is an awesome opportunity to finally read some great, not only Iron Man, but an infinitely cooler Iron Man than Tony Stark, in my opinion, with Victor Von Doom. And that's going up against Chad's pick of just doing more Walt Simonson run, which is fine with Walt Simonson Visionaries Volume 2. So, Chad, do you want to sell Volume 2? What's in those issues?
So, Thor Visionaries, Walt Simonson, Volume 2, contains issues 349 through 355, as well as 357 through 359. It does not contain the Frog Thor, but it does contain the end of the Suture Saga. It does contain Thor and Hela going at it. It does contain all kinds of continued Walt Simonson Thor badassery. And so that is why it's my pick.
All right. Well, J.A., it's your decision ultimately, unless Chad is going against reading more of Walt Simonson, which I doubt. Which one are you going with? Infamous Iron Man or more Walt Simonson?
The Iron Man I wanted to read was Armor Wars. So I've got to go with Walt Simonson's Thor, and we were going to talk about it later today. I'm all in.
Wow. I'm disappointed, unless Chad's going to go against his pick.
It's so hard because, like I said, I do want to read the Infamous Iron Man. I'm actually working on the collection. I've got one more issue to go that I have to track down. But yeah, that doesn't beat Walt Simonson Thor. We'll get to this later, but it's the best of all there is.
All right. So fair enough. Walt Simonson Thor beating out Infamous Iron Man for the next spot. Moving on to the next bracket, a 2-7 matchup. And I think this is kind of sort of ultimately a 2-7 matchup because you got a dark horse coming in with my pick of Weird World, which was the 5-issue miniseries that came out of the Secret Wars series written by Jason Aaron with Mike Del Mundo art, which is just incredible. It tells the story of Archon, who's just kind of like a stand-in for Conan the Barbarian because they didn't have the licensing rights at the time. But Archon is running around this weird, wonky world put together by all the pieces of multi-universes that have fell apart. He ends up hanging out with Crystar. There's awesome Man-Thing stuff. He's fighting Morgan Le Fay. It's like just a slice of all of this awesome Marvel nostalgia. And that's going up against the 2 of J.A.'s pick of God Loves, Man Kills, which I think Weird World is just going to get crushed. Crushed like a bug under the foot of you dare call that thing a human or whatever the line is. J.A., do you want to sell God Loves, Man Kills? Or
do I need to sell it? I don't think I need to sell it.
Well, it's Chad's choice. Again, Chad, which one are we going with?
Yeah, I do love the Mike Del Mundo art, but I've read Weird World. I've read God Loves, Man Kills. And I'll say God Loves, Man Kills is going to be the more powerful experience. That's the one I'm going to go with.
All right, so we are now on to the second round. And so starting off at the top, it's the only book we haven't talked about because it came in at a number 1. Again, not because it's the best pick, but just randomly assigned that. But it's going up against Black Panther and Nation Under Our Feet. And that is the original Jack Kirby run on 2001 A Space Odyssey. So not only is it the movie adaptation.
Wait. We're doing licensed properties? I didn't know we could do licensed properties.
You could have put out a Conan book. That's fine. You
not
could put
Marvel.
Out
It's not a Marvel book.
No,
it's not a Marvel book.
Machine Man shows up, and he's a Marvel character. And long story short, 2001 Space Odyssey we'd be reading is the Treasury edition of the movie adaptation, plus the first 7 issues. Machine Man shows up in issue 8 through 10 and has nothing to do with the rest of the Space Odyssey, the Monoliths storyline or whatever. So I don't think we'll be reading those issues, but we will be reading this issue, the first 7, and it is my pick. And the reason why we should read it is it's that awesome Jack Kirby stuff from the 70s where, like Devil Dinosaur and Demon and all that kind of jazz, like, it's just crazy. It's just batshit crazy stuff.
You're really doing salt in my wounds today there, buddy. With the infamous Iron Man, I have that one. Salt in the wound. It's hard for me to imagine Black Panther being done better than the movies with the Chadwick Boseman. And did I mention that I don't have that 2001 Odyssey Treasury Edition, so I do want to. I've developed a soft spot for all the Jack Kirby craziness, and I feel like that's after he came back to Marvel from his DC days, and he was on full blast with all the crazy ideas. And so I think that'd be fun to take a look at. So 2000.
All right. Well, some of us do have that treasury. It's lovingly taken care of in my collection. But 2001 is moving on. So it will be going up against The Death of Gwen Stacy. So let's go ahead and move on to the bottom bracket. And that is a Walt Simonson Visionaries Volume 2 versus God Loves, Man Kills. So we've got a really tough decision here, folks. Any last impassioned pleas for God Loves, Man Kills, J.A.? You seem to be really into that Walt Simonson.
No. Yeah, but it's Volume 2. We've already read Volume 1. So why are we going back to the well?
Oh, how the tables have turned.
We're going back to the well because this is the best of comics, my friend. The best of comics, Volume 2. Why would we not?
All right, well, it's going to be my deciding vote here. I do feel like if we do Walt Simonson's Mighty Thor Visionaries Volume 2, then we are pretty much planting our flag that we're going to do the rest of the Walt Simonson Visionaries run on the Last Comic Shop, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we do 3 and then Baldur the Brave? God Loves, Man Kills? Oh boy, we've done lots and lots and lots of X-Men books on this particular.
No, we haven't. We haven't.
What are you talking about? I guarantee we go back. We have at least 10 episodes with the X-Men. More than
we don't. We have X of Swords, Inferno, the end of the Krakoan Age.
Oh, come on. We also did X-Men versus the Fantastic Four. We also did X-Men Grand Design. Okay. We did...
I don't count that.
New Mutants, Demon Bear.
Mutants is not the X-Men, thank you very much.
Did we say Mutant Massacre?
Yes.
See, we've done too many.
Uncanny X-Men and New Teen Titans.
Man.
Oh, that's a crossover. Outback X-Men. Okay, yeah, we did do a lot of X-Men.
But it's going to win. I'm going to go with God Loves, Man Kills, just simply because I think God Loves, Man Kills is a really poignant book, especially with what's going on right now, and I feel like that should move on. So
it's considered one of the greatest graphic novels it's up there with Dark Knight Returns. And
so we have to decide now whether it's going to be 2001 A Space Odyssey, that particular one, versus Death of Gwen Stacy.
Yes.
Just Gwen Stacy. Death of Stacy. Move it on.
All right.
No need.
All right, fine then. So here we are. So we've got as the finals the Death of Gwen
Spider-Man
Stacy.
Guys against one guy who likes the X-Men. I see how this is going.
It's a truly an awesome matchup. These are 2 of the greatest stories ever told at Marvel. Again, the Death of Gwen Stacy versus God Loves, Man Kills.
God Loves Man Kills is so powerful. It's a great book. It's, you can't denigrate it. But The Death of Gwen Stacy, as many X-Men books as we've covered, if I'm looking at Spider-Man, we've got Kraven's Last Hunt, we've got Spider-Man and Double Trouble. Not a lot of Spidey stories in there in the archives.
That's true.
And the kids love their Spider-Man.
That's true. That's very true. That's why I am still going to vote for The Death of Gwen Stacy, although I do feel that God Loves Man Kills is a more complete, quote-unquote, story. Because, again, in this collection we'd also be reading The Death of Captain Stacy, which...
Can I point out that both books are pretty depressing subject matter? Can we find something that's a little bit happy?
Hey, I didn't pick these things, guys.
Yeah.
You guys...
Listen, I gave you Squirrel Girl, and I saw how you responded. You get Death of Despair from now on.
To be honest, I actually wouldn't mind reading The Death of Gwen Stacy. Again, I guess the other Stacy dying, one wants to read that, maybe. I don't know. Is that important? Does that factor into Gwen Stacy's death?
What? Is that important? What? What?
All right.
I mean, it's Dennis Leary, right?
Oh,
you care if Dennis Leary dies?
Oh, don't even do this to me.
All right.
Don't even do this to me.
Let's not get
that
into
movie
this.
Screwed up everything that's so important about Spider-Man.
We'll save it for the eventual show. So in 2024, before the end of the year, we will be covering The Death of the Stacys. That's right. Amazing Spider-Man issues where Captain Stacy bites it and then Gwen Stacy does, which ends the Silver Age. So that is our official selection. And it's a really, really great book. But I feel like I think this is a list that we will go back to time and time again because we planted a flag a little bit here. Like, I feel like we should read all of the books that were listed in this tournament because I think they're all really great. So who knows? We might eventually get to all of them.
Translation, good luck getting new Marvel stuff out of us next year.
In any case, we don't have new Marvel stuff for this week's show either. That is Walt Simonson's Mighty Thor Visionaries Volume 1, and it's coming up right after these commercial breaks.
Hi, it's Carlo Calantuan, last comic shop podcast listener and comic book tragic here in the Philippines. Mabuhay! When I'm in the US, I'm always on the lookout for a good deal on boards, bags, boxes, and all other manner of comic book related supplies. And that's why I love to go to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off of all my orders. Not only do I get a discount on everything I buy at BCW, but I'm able to support the podcast when I use LCSPOD at checkout. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head over to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD. Oh, and guys, I'm still waiting for that Tressie review. Come on, when is it?
Do you long to see an exiled Greek god summon an army of heroes to wage war against his crazed mutant cyborg nemesis? Do you feel a deep yearning to witness the daily life of an evil, rebellious dominatrix in her natural habitat? Do you wish Saturday morning cartoons had more lizards with revolvers and wasps with shotguns? Well, you're in the right place, partner, because we've got all that and more. Lords of the Cosmos 5 is frothing at the mouth with testosterone-drenched battle cries, red-hot revenge plots, guns a-blazing mutant military ops, and some good old-fashioned unicorn torture. Now on Kickstarter.
Whoever listens to this podcast, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Walt Simonson's Thor.
Wow. That's right. We are back and we are talking about the Mighty Thor, specifically the beginning of the Walt Simonson era. Chad, what did we read and who did all the art, writing, inking, remastering, coloring, lettering?
Okay, so the big name here is Walt Simonson, who was behind the story, the pencils, and the inks primarily. He did get assists from Terry Austin and Bob Wyacek. John Workman Jr. does the lettering. And this is where we get some bones of contention. The original colors were George Rousseau and Christy Shield, but then you did get redone colors for some of the collected editions. And that's another bone of contention because there are multiple Visionaries Thor Walter Simonson Volume 1s out there. The one we set out to read was the one that contains issues 337 to 348. That was the version I had published in 2001, where the coloring is a little closer to the original issues. So the second edition came out in 2008. It was recolored with that more glossier, that digital look that Marvel has put on a lot of their classic stories, which honestly take something out of it, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, and it was repackaged again in 2017.
Ooh.
Reduced the number of issues, so they added a volume. And Andrew,
Yeah, to sell more books. What are you talking about? They knew this was a hot seller. Why not? That's BS, Marvel. That's BS.
they do have better coloring.
Okay, so it's not as garish as the original remaster edition.
Correct, but it's not dot matrix. It's sort of that in between. It feels a lot like the Penguin classics.
Well,
Okay.
if you're talking about garish coloring, look no further than the other way that you can get this particular collection of issues, not just in issue form, but you can get it in the omnibus, which was recently re-released by Marvel just this past year. I picked it up, and boy howdy, that's glossy. Don't look directly at it, because it will blind you with its glossy.
Why does Marvel do that? Why can't we just get scans? That's why Andy and I have an age-old argument versus the original floppies, as people call them, versus the collected editions. This is why the original versions are the way to go. You get them as they were originally presented and all their glory, and occasionally you go to Comic-Cons and get them autographed by Walt Simonson in Baltimore, and it's wonderful. With that dinosaur autograph. So yeah, you hoity-toity fellas in your collected editions, you're missing out here.
Any case. But let's move on, in the interests of time, to the 10-cent synopsis of what happens in these particular issues. Now, again, I'm going with the collection that I had, which includes these couple extra issues that, again, were not in the 2017 edition. But simply put, Walt Simonson comes on the scene and he blows up the mighty Thor. Literally, on the first cover, where he has Beta Ray Bill taking the Mjolnir, smashing through the logo on that first issue of his run. And again, that sets the stage for the first couple of issues of this, where Thor meets Beta Ray Bill. He's running away from a bunch of demons. He ends up being worthy enough to pick up the hammer, which, again, I don't think was a thing at the time. Like, I don't think a lot of other people picked up the hammer. So the fact that Beta Ray Bill, this ugly horse-faced looking dude, is able to pick it up was a big swerve, because you really initially think this guy's going to be a big baddie. But ultimately, he's got such a noble spirit, Beta Ray Bill, that they go back to Asgard, they fight over Mjolnir and who has the ability to wield it, and eventually Beta Ray Bill gives it up in his honorable fashion, and Odin bestows on him his own hammer in Stormbreaker. And the two of them run off with Sif, who has taken a liking to Beta Ray Bill, to go fight the demons with the Scuttlebutt, talking robot ship. And eventually from there, Beta Ray Bill is gifted with the ability to turn back into his normal form, so he's not so ugly. Him and Sif go running off to fight more demons, and Thor ends up becoming a construction worker, which is kind of starts the second story arc in this particular run. He fights a big dragon. He ends up shacking up with Lorelei, who's the sister of the Enchantress, longtime Thor villain. Eventually you get Malekith, which MCU fans might remember was the really terrible bad guy from that terrible Dark World story, which is sad because he's actually a pretty decent bad guy in this. But they're going after the Casket of Ancient Winners, where you heard that. And all this time, there is a long, slow burn going in the background, and literally, it's a slow burn as you get Surtur, the god of fire from Norse mythology, building the Twilight Sword so that he can come and whoop some ass all over Asgard. That's
I think it's some Balder the Brave,
Yeah.
being angry that he has to kill a bunch of people.
He's got the PTSD. You also have a great issue with the Terry Austin inks about a lost Viking which is kind of neat. But again, it's in that second half of the series, which is kind of fun.
Everyone's buying this for the Beta Ray Bill.
That's right. That's my initial thought, is that I really think that the Beta Ray Bill 5 issues that starts off this particular run is some of the best comic booking, some of the best Thor. It's an incredibly engaging, incredibly moving storyline. Beta Ray Bill, there's an obvious reason why he hit the ground running as a fan favorite among comic book circles, because he's so noble. He's got that, terrible looking horse face, and that just makes you sympathize for him even more, that such a noble heart exists in such an ugly looking body. And I won't lie, I kind of like Beta Ray Bill. I think he actually looks uglier when he turns back into that noseless thing. But from there you go, and he becomes a construction worker. And it's got some fun parts, but it's not until the Casket of Ancient Winters and you get Malekith and another good bad guy that it starts picking up steam again. But that's just my thoughts. J.A., this is the first time you've read it, right? I mean, from beginning to end, like all the issues. What did you think of the first time through?
Yeah, I loved it, especially the Beta Ray Bill bits, which is why I was so disappointed that he wasn't in that. I guess we were thinking he was going to be in that third Thor movie. I understand why they didn't put him in, because you put him in, then you have to have him pick up the hammer. And they didn't want anyone picking up the hammer until Steve Rogers picked up the hammer for that impact. So you can't have Beta Ray Bill. But now we could have had Beta Ray Bill. They could have put him in the fourth one. Might have saved that movie a bit, but they didn't. They went another way. So maybe we'll get him in the fifth one. I don't know. The problem is that the Stormbreaker that he uses is a lot cooler than the Stormbreaker from the MCU. I digress. It's really nice because Beta Ray Bill 1 is this ugly-looking monster-like creature that you would think is evil and turns out to have a noble and pure heart, as pure, if not more pure than Thor's, and then bests him in battle. Odin allows it to happen to teach Thor a lesson in humility. And you get that nice little switch at the end where Thor loses his ability to become Donald Blake. Essentially, Beta Ray Bill gets that, so he can go between being the normal guy and the Thor with the horse face.
and Donald Blake disappears and nobody cares.
Right. No one mentions that. So then he's got to get Nick Fury to set him up with a new identity. I thought the writing was really good in this. There was a nice little comic nod where, well, everyone will know that I'm Thor. And Nick Fury goes, here, wear these glasses. It works for that other guy.
And that other guy shows up. The other guy shows up in the next panel. Clark Kent, right there. It's not even hid, folks. There. Hey, Clark. I think I know that guy. I know that you can gush about this book for forever, Chad, in a day. But one of the questions I had particularly for you is, why do you feel like this particular run of Thor, you've read other runs since then, and you've read the Jack Kirby stuff, and why do you think this was so monumental? Like, why do you think this, like, changed everything? Like, why do you think this was such a, like, an iconic run?
I'll just start off by repeating what I said earlier. This is the best of comics, because you go back to Jack the King Kirby, and he talked about how with comics, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about CGI. You have a pencil and your imagination and whatever else flows from there. And you get Walt Simonson, who is an educated man, and he has studied the Norse mythology. He takes the notes from the Norse mythology. Norse mythology unto itself has so many of those wacky elements that, people turning into different creatures, and if someone has eaten the food of this, they become taken over by this, and all those different constructs. But he takes some of those basic Norse myths, he combines those with the sci-fi fantasy elements of something like a Beta Ray Bill and Scuttlebutt, being shot at planet Earth and all Thor has to stop them, with, his own tale of nobility and worthiness. And then he sprinkles that with humor and just everything you would want in a comic book. You get these big cosmic elements going on in the background. You get these sweet, heartfelt moments. You get Thor and his varied sidekicks, whether it's the Last Viking who wants Thor to kill him so he can go to Valhalla, and Thor's like, no, I won't do that. But yeah, I'll bring you into battle with me with this dragon. Or you get the son who his dad has bequeathed him the casket of Ancient Winters, and the son gets steel-coated bullets because he knows that the iron will keep away Malekith and the dwarves. You just get all that stuff mixed in together, and everything flows, and it touches on all these different aspects. You get a little bit of romance, you get a little bit of humor, you get a whole lot of heart, and then plus, because I came into comics in the 90s, I kind of had to work my way backwards. Every comic artist from the 90s that I love, my Rob Liefelds, my Todd McFarlane's, my Jim Lee's, they all aped from this series and the stuff that Walt Simonson and John Workman were doing. You can see it. I was reading the Terry Austin inked issue of Thor and thinking, is that Todd McFarlane? Like, these are Todd McFarlane faces. And you could see it. I love Rob Liefeld. He apes the John Workman letters and the style and the frenetic energy. There's so much that is going on in this Thor book, which was coming out side by side with Frank Miller's Daredevil. This is some of the best of comics happening from Marvel at this time, where you're just letting these creative people go and tell these awesome stories. And I just keep saying it doesn't get better.
Yeah. And it was a time in which, again, a lot of the sacred cows were kind of slaughtered right before our eyes. Donald Blake disappears and nobody cares. I mean, an integral part of the Thor storyline is that he has Donald Blake, and the fact that he has to hold the hammer for 60 seconds or he'll transform back into Donald Blake. I mean, again, giving him some limitations. I mean, it always worked for me from a particular perspective of you need to give, godlike characters sometimes a kryptonite. But, at the same time, in this particular book, Walt Simonson shows, well, why do you have to do that? Like, why do you have to do, like, he's a god. Let him have godlike adventures. Like, let him have fights against giant dragons and killing, millions of demons on some alien planet.
Spoiler alert, he takes away the Donald Blake limitation, but also eventually breaks every bone in Thor's body.
He does do that. Makes Thor go into some weird armor thing, which I think is
armor. Yeah,
I hated that look for Thor. I really did.
And he gets the beard for the first time.
No. This run caps out for me around Frog Thor and the fact that Walt Simonson just goes to writing the stories and not doing the pencils anymore, even though I love Sal Buscema. But this is the run. Like, you're going to read any of the Walt Simonson run, you should read this, and probably Volume 2. Again, that's why I didn't really want to move on, even though Frog Thor is in Volume 3. This capped at the end of the Surtur Saga for me. And, this is the build-up to that. Chad's pointing out the fact that there's also that executioner. Fine, there are a couple issues here and there.
There's a lot of comics, stuff. Sir.
And I like how you said that, a lot of the 90s guys sort of aped his style and copied a lot. I wish they would have copied his panel layouts, because this is the best of panel layouts. They weren't constrained to have the same amount of panels on the page, but they also didn't just do all jaggedy waggedy and, okay, I'm going to have 4 panels or 2 panels and they're going to slice across each other for the heck of action.
Yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely. The layouts are very, very well done. It's a classic panel layout, but at the same time, it's also dramatic, taking advantage of kind of marrying two types of.
It's very cinematic. It very much looks like you're reading a storyboard from a movie. A lot of these panel layouts. I did love middle of the trade where they were putting out an issue before something happened in the Avengers that was going to come, so they just gave you 3 panels of blankness and said, you got to read the story so you know what happened.
Oh, Lordy. Is that Under Siege? Or is
that's Secret Wars.
Oh, that's Secret Wars.
Which, if you're reading an issues the very next month, they give you those 3 panels and tell you to cut them out and paste them into that spot.
Lordy Hannah. Another good thing for those folks that have not read this Walt Simonson run but love the MCU movies is I also feel like another great thing that comes out of this particular run is you start getting more of a 3-dimensional Loki, more fleshed out Loki. If you want to talk about a Loki that has layers and is not just evil bad guy, kind of smarmy, kind of charismatic in some ways, you start getting a Loki like that in this. My particular favorite Loki moment is when Balder the Brave cuts his head off. And he just picks it up and puts it back on his head as Balder the Brave runs away and cries and stuff like that. Oh, I killed him. No.
Yeah, it's not just Loki. I think a lot of the secondary characters also get a bit more fleshed out. I mean, even like Lady Sif, she's not just pining after Thor. She's like, no, forget it. I'm going with this other guy. And Thor's like miffed a bit.
Yeah, it's shuffling the deck in a lot of ways. It's setting up some things that they're still pulling from Marvel nowadays. Like, it's really sad because the Mighty Thor does have a massive run of issues between the Jack Kirby run and the Walt Simonson run, but they're largely forgotten for the most part. There's a neat little storyline that happens around the 300s where they start to flesh out the Eternals and the Deviants, and Thor gets involved with that. It's called the Eternal Saga, which isn't bad. I've read it before, and it kind of starts bringing in all the other gods from various mythologies and stuff like that. But it is really weird that Jack Kirby, Walt Simonson, and then you're in the desert for the rest of
Jack Kirby and John Byrne, you said? Because the same thing happened with Fantastic Four.
No, please. They had Airwalker. Come on now.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks with our ratings of this first volume of Walt Simonson, plus recommendations. Stay tuned for that.
You know what I think? This world we're in right now is the fairy tale. And what's really real is on the other side.
Ramsey, mechanic by day, aspiring comic book creator by night, went into the woods and tripped. He was bombarded by bizarre and mysterious glyphs that he drew into his sketch pad and onto the body of his muse, Regina.
Oh, groovy! Your art is crawling all over me.
Shit. What is going on with you?
What's going on with you? All of a sudden, you're a complete drip, baby. Maybe you need another limb to the head. Ah!
Bloom, written and created by Ted Sikora, with art by Butch Mappa.
How are you feeling, Ram Man?
You've never experienced a story so astonishing, so far out and away from the beaten path.
Where in the am I?
Blast off with Bloom, the origin of a prophet. Order yours at herotomorrow.com.
LastComicShopPodcast.com is the destination for all things shop. Plan your week with upcoming show schedules, the latest books, recommendations, and chatter from the crew. Subscribe to the show on all major podcasting platforms from one convenient location. Show your support and browse the merch store. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies for the fam, coffee mugs, magnets, totes, and more. Check out exclusive content through the show's YouTube channel and follow the pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and others. All this and so much more at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for ratings, where we have the unenviable task of rating Walt Simonson's Thor Volume 1. I mean,
what are you talking about?
You're going to give us a rating scale. I think this is a 4 across the boards, and we should just talk more about this book, but we got to go through the motions. J.A., what do you got?
We're going to go Stormbreakers, and that's the comic book accurate Stormbreaker, not this thing in the movie with Groot handles.
All right. Are we all in agreement, gentlemen, that this is a 4?
Yes. And the one that you can get right now, the one that's in print, has the new colors. So they're that mixture. It's not for print coloring, but it's also not that garish stuff that they were putting out in the mid 2000s. It doesn't go quite as far. You have to get volume 2. Again, as we said, it's because they want to sell more books, but well worth it. It's only like $15. So that has Thor and Beta Ray Bill on the cover, struggling over Mjolnir.
Yeah.
I like the way it's almost Chris Claremont-esque, the way he has these underlying story elements that carry through across story arcs, going on and on, whether it be Sidar making the sword and building the army, or the beginnings of the Malekith bit, or the whole Baldar situation, which goes and goes and goes and eventually ends in the Baldar miniseries. I think that's really well done, and it's only usually a page or two. It doesn't take you out of the immediate story, but it also doesn't feel like you have to have all of this massive back lore. Like, the biggest problem I had with Claremont X-Men is, like, I felt I needed an index of all this stuff I need to know. Now you can go to Wikipedia, thankfully. But back in the day, there was no Wikipedia to have an understanding of all these little cameos or bits that are going on that have been going for 20 or 30 issues. And if you hadn't read that, you have no idea why for 2 panels you see somebody in the background in a jumpsuit. This is done much better than that.
And I will agree with that. As my final thoughts, this is an incredible collection for any new comic book fan or somebody that hasn't picked up Thor before to pick up and read. Walt Simonson comes in and he just kind of throws the playbook out the window. I wish people would do that a little bit more nowadays, where you don't get, like, again, more number ones. They just continue writing the stories with the legacy numbering, and they just say, hey, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm throwing out the rule book and just starting from scratch, and you can pick up right here. You can pick up right here, and you can read my story arc in its entirety, and you won't miss a trick. And that's what happens with this particular run. You don't need to know who Beta Ray Bill is. They explain it. You don't need to know why, Thor is now a construction worker. They explain it. They explain all the bad guys, all the main characters. It's masterful.
I will point out, he doesn't do any constructing the entire time he's a construction worker. He does more destructing than constructing.
But Walt Simonson does do a lot of constructing of the Thor mythology from this point on, and people are pulling it from here. I mean, I remember reading this run originally and thinking to myself, boy, Balder should just be Odin's son, right? Like, why don't they just come out and say that he's Odin's son? Because there's so many, like, little, you pick up these little threads where that's probably the case. And then later on, what happens in the Dan Jurgens run? They're like, hey, he's his son. Balder is his son. And then so like they just set up all these little tiny nice things here, which is really great. Chad, gosh, it's your book, the Year of Chad.
One of the things that really appeals to me, and this is something as a kid, whenever I first started reading comic books, I was not a reader, right? And reading comic books didn't count. But by the time I got to high school, it turned out that reading comic books helped me with a lot of mythological elements. Started raising my hand. Shakespeare was a little bit easier for me because of, dealing with some of the weird language that you see in comic books and, like, deconstructing those things. I feel like this is a book where not only are you entertained, but you're subtly learning things about Norse mythology. You're getting some of these tales that we would see explored later on, including in the Neil Gaiman Norse mythology book. But I feel like there's just so much goodness here. I love the action, love the layouts, I love the clarity of the book. If you wanted to knock it for being verbose, you could, but you'd be wrong. You could read this just by looking at the pictures and picking up what's going on, but the writing it's just masterful all along the way. And I go back to so many things that I found secondhand, whether it's the Doom. And it's just a joy. My only regret, like I said, is we don't have time to go through it all. It culminates in issue 382, which is a ways away. But boy, there's so many great moments between here and there. Oh, our rating scale should have just been 4s. How many 4s do you give this? 4. 4 Thors. 4.
All right. right. Well, one thing that we hope is also a bunch of fours is our recommendations. Yes, it's that time of every single show where if you want to go into your local comic book shop and pick up Walt Simonson's Visionaries, the Mighty Thor Volume 1, or however it's repackaged nowadays, again, an omnibus, you maybe can find some of the single issues. Yeah, right. Those are kind of pricey. But in any case, pick it up. And while you're at your local comic book shop, here are some other things that we hope you pick up as well. We're going to start off with J.A. Scott, who I think has another Thor book for us.
I do, but this is not Walter Simonson Volume 2. I think that's been recommended already, even though it didn't get voted. But it is Thor. It's Jason Aaron's run on Thor, and specifically the saga of Gore, the God Butcher, which came out of Thor God of Thunder 1 through 11. And this is the story of the God Butcher. Some of it similar to the movie that just came out, but lots of differences. Obviously, in this book, there is no Jane Foster Thor. Thor goes into the future and ends up teaming up with his future self to destroy the God Butcher. The God Butcher is drawn much uglier than Christian Bale. But looks incredible because the entire thing is done by Isad Ribic and his art. Some scenes from the movie are completely pulled from the comic. There's this image of this massive god that's died on the side, looks sort of like a big mammoth mixed with a whale thing that's in the movie. That's straight from a full page panel spread in the comic, and Thor looking down and all these gods that have been killed. So as Marvel does, you can get it in a couple of trades, or you can get it all combined into one trade. That's just that storyline. So that's what I recommend you buy.
All right. Chad, do you also have a Mighty Thor book or something different?
I'm going to go a little bit different just because I recommended the Simonson Thor enough. I'm going to go with Superman Up in the Sky, which was originally published through the Walmart exclusive $5 100-page Giants, but has since been collected. It's written by Tom King with art by Andy Kubert, and this is a book I took with me on my summer vacation this year. There's a young girl who's been kidnapped, and Superman has to go and rescue her. And that's your basic premise, but along the way, the story defines, why Superman is Superman and what that means for everyone else. And then, about midway through, King and Kubert just decide they're going to have fun with it. And so he goes and he races the Flash. You have an issue of that. Find out how that works. And there's a bet that Lex Luthor makes. And anyway, there's an issue where Superman has to box. Similar to the great Superman versus Muhammad Ali, you get Superman in the middle of the boxing ring. There's an issue where he joins up with Easy Company and Sergeant Rock, and Clark Kent has amnesia, doesn't know who he is, but he's there, and you find out what makes him super. And then at the end of the day, you get the story that had me crying in the middle of the beach, kind of embarrassingly, just because it's so inspiring, it's so beautiful. We're talking about Simonson's Thor is the best of comics. I think some of this Tom King stuff is the best you're going to get in modern books. And so Superman Up in the Sky, the paperback is out there. It's definitely worth your time.
Yeah. Another book that's out there, to bring it back to the Thor tip for the end of recommendations, is the current Immortal Thor run done by Al Ewing. I had an opportunity to sit down at my local library, who had the first 14 issues. And as I was waiting for my kids to finish up one of their sporting things, I sat down and just literally devoured this run.
That means that no one else can read it because you've eaten it.
I didn't mean that way. Fine.
Well, you said literally devoured.
I know.
It's a good thing the library has bathrooms.
Yes, that's a lot of fiber.
Very fast. And so, yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It was a wonderful read, and it went really, really quickly. And so kudos and thank you so much to my local library for providing me with an opportunity to read these comics. Make sure that you're checking out your local library as well, because they're a great place where you can pick up comic books for free and take them home, read them, follow along with the last comic shop. But boy, you should really read that first, at least the first 5 issues of The Immortal Thor for no other reason than, that old analogy where people are telling stories and you have the shadows on the wall, right? Well, Thor is the shadow, right? He's the shadow on the wall. But what is generating the shadow? Something bigger than Thor, right? And so you meet a Thor that is like Uber Thor, like more powerful Thor. And he has to put together the Thor Corps to fight this Thor. And it's him and Loki and Beta Ray Bill comes back and Jane Foster and even Storm from the X-Men. They all team up to fight this other Thor that wants to break them upon his wheel. So it's really, really great. And from there, it just keeps going. Keeps going. Every single issue. You want to talk about somebody that understands Norse mythology as well. Not only that, but just mythology overall. Al Ewing does that in spades. And so, like his run on The Immortal Hulk, I'm really loving this. And I'll probably be in for the rest of the run. In any case, one thing that we're hoping you're in for is the rest of the run of The Last Comic Shop, because it's not ending anytime soon. We got brand new episodes coming out all for the rest of 2024, including our 200th episode in just a couple short weeks. That's right. We're going to be covering Watchmen with a host of our friends, and so we hope that you do not miss that episode or any others, and you can do that by rate, reviewing, and subscribing over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
And while we might be the Last Comic Shop podcast, we don't want to be the last comic shop. So we encourage you guys to get out there and support your comic retailers. Support your local libraries. Go to www.comicshoplocator.com and find those places that could fill in some of those books the library may or may not have. Make sure you look for the Walt Simonson Thor and all its varied collections. Some coloring is better than others. You could look for Thor, Gore the God Butcher. Gore was right. By Jason Aaron and Assad Ribic. That's out there. You can look for Superman Up in the Sky by King and Kubert. Or you could look for The Immortal Thor by the immortal Al Ewing. Those things and more wait for you at your local libraries and comic shops. So get out there and support those folks. And then circle back to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where you can find what else, J.A.?
You can find a link to our merch store. We have t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags, any manner of gift item that you could buy for yourself or your significant other or friend who likes comic books. And this week only, winged helmets.
Oh,
that's right. They don't make you fly, but they do make you look like Thor.
Yes. So, just like that young girl in Adventures in Babysitting. Don't you remember? You're like,
yes.
I was going to ask. Or the Kingpin is a car mechanic.
That's right. I love that movie. And that was before comic books were like part of pop culture or whatever. A great movie. And she's running around in the Thor helmet.
Vincent D'Onofrio is the Thor.
Yeah, absolutely. And J.A., real quickly, where can folks save some money on their comic book supplies every single week, just in case they want to?
They can save them at bcwsupplies.com. If you use the promo code LCSPOD, you get 10% off your purchases. So that's bags, boards, boxes. Even if you like trading cards, they've got stuff for that as well. These plastic things that will hold those plastic things that you put your comic book in so you can't read them anymore.
Yeah, but they also have like sports memorabilia and all kinds of great stuff. So like it's the football season now, so if you have, football helmets or whatever, they have cases for those things, whatever. Long story short, we don't have a Patreon, folks. We do not put out content for cash. We have this promo code so you can save some money on your comic book supplies as well as support our show. So we highly recommend use that promo code anytime you can. Support The Last Comic Shop because we want to keep on bringing you these awesome episodes in future. Any case, until the future is next week, I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith, and we hope that you stay safe, stay thundering, and remember, if you are a horse-faced looking alien, you can still get a date. I mean, Sif was like all about her. Like, it didn't matter. She was like, oh yeah.
But yeah, because of reasons that are not safe for work.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.